On Saturday, the 25th of February 2023, Nigerians elected a new president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who has since been issued a certificate of return in accordance with the law. However, the opposition party rejects the election results and vowed to challenge the process in court. Today on Fafanua Afrika, we're going to focus on youth participation in the just concluded election. One pivotal thing to note is that history will tell the story of young Nigerians who took the lead in the democratic assertiveness, came together to test the numeric strength at the polls. These young people have rallied around their chosen candidate in 9 months, propelling a less-known party into the front lines. The knowledge of their unified strength has become a weapon in their artillery. They say change does not happen at once. It happens in small steps, every day, by the hour. In 9 months, young Nigerians have brought about change. We have witnessed a generational disruption. They have labored, perspired, crowdfunded, and pushed the campaign of their candidate. They changed the story by registering and coming out to vote en masse. Welcome to another episode of Fafanua Afrika. Here we discuss contemporary issues that affect the African youth. My name is Blessings Masugu, and of course, I'm still your host on the show. Stay with us as we take you through the next 1 hour. Once again, welcome on the show. We are talking about youth participation in politics with the just concluded presidential election in Nigeria as our focus. Now, I'm elated for the guests that will be joining us on the show today. I have joining me 2 analysts from Abuja and 1 from Lagos. Join me as I welcome political analyst in Abuja, Nigeria, Mubarak Aliyu. Thank you so much, Mubarak, for joining me. My pleasure. Also, I have public relations enthusiast Isa Omotosho in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you, Omotosho, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And of course, I have Olugbenga George, a political analyst also from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you, Olugbenga, for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure to have you join me. Now, thank you, gentlemen. This has just, the country has just seen a conclusion, or would I say, because, I mean, at this point, we don't know what it is. They're saying that they're taking the issue to court. But generally, what we know is that the elections have just been concluded and the president-elect has emerged. Now, I would want for us to have this conversation, I mean, as youths, we see that the youths have altered history. This election will go down in history as one that garnered a lot of youth, regardless of how the results eventually turned out. So I'm going to start with you, Omotosho. What do you think resulted into this?
Well, thank you very much. Firstly, I want to actually congratulate the youths, regardless of the outcome of the election, whether it's favored a section or the other. I think we need to be proud of ourselves. The kind of change we witnessed in this election is one that once again affirms the narrative that if youths are ready to take over the country, they can actually do that. So one of the things I believe was a leading factor is we cannot take it away is the issue of the EndSARS in 2020. Of course, it was then that many youths understood the power they hold, the power they have in their hand, the power to not only hold the government accountable, the power to also take the next step, take the step, take the bull by its horns. We not only went to, register for our PVCs, we also went to the polls with our PVCs. So this time around, one of the things I also noticed, because on the day of the election, I was outside, I, went to various polling units. I noticed that unlike previous elections where we had youths always, coming out to play football, some youths, sitting in their rooms, many youths, actually came out to, hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so many youths actually came out to exercise their civic rights, and they did not only come out, they also stood by. We heard reports of people, staying under the sun, staying under the rain to, cast their votes. And in fact, it was a nice view to watch. So one thing I have to admit is that this time around, it's a win for us. That is one. Then secondly, I think we can also deny the fact that many youths are tired of the norm. So we are actually, unlike in 2015, when the whole country now we're happy about change. I think it's this time around the youth themselves now took that change, owned the narrative, and not only had it in mind, they took it to the polls. And regardless of the outcome of the election, I really want to say that the youth actually took the polls by its own. And I really do hope that we do not allow it to end here. We begin to strategize and we begin to build on our current win.
Thank you so much for that, Omotosho. Mubarak, do you agree with what he says, or what else do you think triggered such massive participation from the youth?
Thank you. So I agree with everything Omotosho has just said. I think the whole NSAS movement triggered a new awakening among Nigerian youth. But I would also be one of those young Nigerians who would say that this is the beginning of changing the political landscape. I think we actually have to go a step further, or a few steps further, in terms of how we organize ourselves. And participation in the electoral process is just one amongst many things that we need to do in order to achieve transformative change in terms of politics and the economical transformation that I think every youth seeks in Nigeria. And I say this because one thing that unites all young Nigerians is the economic situation of the country, which we are all familiar with, ranging from unemployment to the wider monetary crisis that we're all facing. So I think while participation in the electoral process is crucial for young people to change the political landscape, we must work on systems of accountability, because right now that seems to be lacking. After NSAS and the tragic Lekki massacre, it was difficult to hold anyone accountable. It was difficult for young people to organize themselves in proximity to the powerful structures of government and to make their voices known long term. And I think this is a concern I have. Assuming the preferred candidate had won, did we have any system of accountability as young Nigerians, for a candidate who always reminds us, by the way, to hold him accountable? And I fear that we do not have that system of accountability, particularly because political organization is lacking. So I think we need to go a step further after participation in the electoral process to discuss how we can make our voices more heard in the structures of power. We need to discuss how we can create leadership which can represent us at the higher levels of the power structures.
All right, thank you so much for that. And also, I would like for us to talk about one very interesting thing that got my attention. Olubenga, I would like to ask you this one. There was a party who started, campaigning in just about 6 months before the election, but that's the Labour Party, and they were able to attract the interest of the youth. Why do you think that was?
Well, thank you very much once again for the opportunity. The two speakers that have spoken earlier have actually highlighted one of the reasons why it's happened. One of the reasons basically is the fact that the Nigerian youth are tired, and they actually want to go in an entirely different direction where politics and leadership is concerned. What we've had in the country so far has been a recycling of leadership, the same set of people with the same set of faces. Perhaps the names change per time, but you find out that what we still have are the same set of people who, come in different clothing. But interestingly, we now have a population in Nigeria where the youth dominate, where the youth, have the highest figure. Over 60% of Nigeria's population being youth. I think we know what that means. That would definitely mean that the demand will be higher. The economic plans and policies is expected to be tailored toward the development, of this set of people. But the question we should ask is, what do we have? What is the reality on ground? lack of jobs and joblessness, unemployment, at the highest statistics ever, inflationary rates, which the youth who do not have jobs have to also cope with. The same person that doesn't have jobs now has to buy things at a very expensive rate. So you look at the educational system, which sometimes is like maybe they're opium. We can hide under the guise of I'm in school or I'm going to school. You find out that the educational system is also shut down. We saw that last year, and it's been a repeating occurrence over the years, in the Nigerian system. So there's been a set of people who have been boiling, who have been demanding, who have been yearning for change. And the emergence of the Labour Party candidates who, just appeared on the scene 6 months to the election period, excited a lot of Nigerians because they feel like, okay, though he might have been in power or been in government, but this is not one of the popular names or faces that we have been seeing over the years. This is an entirely different person. And interestingly for him, according to track record, he has a track record that the youths want to identify with. I think one of the major things, again, that endear the Nigerian youth is that they have seen a wide margin between the poor and the rich. They've seen how much they have starved, how much penury they live in, how much lack and want they live in. And despite that, they also see some other people who are living, maybe I should use the colloquial language, who are living la vida loca, who are living in absolute opulence. So you realize that they see these people, they see how they spend money, they see the schools they go to, they see the cars they drive, they see the materials they use, and we're in the same society. So the Nigerian people wanted someone that is totally different from this set of people. Peter Obi, interestingly, happened to have a track record of frugality. He's maintained a record of cutting the cost of governance when he was the governor of Anambra State, and I think that goes well to speak for him. And it made it easy for the Nigerians to quickly say, let's embrace this one. He has this history. Perhaps he will be able to manage our resources and maybe give us a bit of the share of the cake, because that is what Nigerians, especially the youth, actually want. Better lives, better programs, better opportunities to be able to fulfill themselves in the Nigerian society.
All right, thank you for that, Olugbenga. So you see, the youth are the center of this conversation, and we cannot proceed further without hearing what they themselves had to say about the just concluded elections. And that's why right now I'll be taking a look at, or listening rather, to what the youth out there had to say. So we'll be right back to continue the conversation. Do take a listen.
The youth participation was a very good one. They came out en masse to vote for the candidate of their choice, and you will see that from the atmosphere after the election result was announced, and everybody is in a mood that look like maybe someone died or they declare national mourning days. It's because the youth have put a lot of effort into it. They came out en masse, they vote, and it just seemed as if that their vote didn't count, and it's actually demoralizing.
In terms of the participation from the youth, it's actually very commending, and it's expected of an average Nigerian citizen to do what they did, because this is about the time Nigeria had the highest number of youths coming up to take what belongs to them. We know who won. We actually believe that it was a seemingly good exercise, and we all had the support and belief and trust that INEC was going to give us something that we all believed and yelled for. But it is a disappointment that has always been.
Definitely, I was very impressed, very happy the way the youth turn up in this election. I was so happy. And I just hope and pray they should turn up in this coming election also.
Actually, the election was very, very smoothly. I'm really impressed. But I'm just praying to Almighty God that the president-elect that should perform, deliver to the nation.
To me, I see to it that they have ringed the election, you understand? For the whole Etiosa side that I state, I believe that I can't see anybody that will say that I will not vote for Peter Obi. I don't know if you understand me. So, but it was a shock to all of us when they said it's not the Labour Party that won the election.
The youth turned out massively. I believe they turned out, but what I see in this last election was that because they turned out poorly because they were really hungry. Maybe what me I heard people saying that maybe because of this EndSARS saga that happened last time, that was the reason why people did not turn out for this last election. But I just pray that this coming one will turn out positively.
Well, those were the opinions of the youth across Africa, especially in Nigeria, regarding the just concluded elections. Now, Omotosho, I would like to put you on the spot. Looking at the number, I mean, it's very difficult to reconcile the numbers, seeing how this was a record-breaking turnout where you had 93+ million registered voters. Although, yes, the number of accredited voters will definitely drop a little, but then we're seeing just about 29 million votes counted. So would you say that the youth were actually robbed of their votes, hence their right?
Thank you very much. I wouldn't say the election was robbed, and I would actually say that, to be honest, the election was fair. I'm a youth myself, but we need to be realistic. There were a lot of issues preceding the election. We had the issue of cash crunch, where not everyone had access to cash. And we must also remember that as much as people registered for their PVCs, not everyone registered for their PVCs where they stay. You understand? The proximity of many voters from where they stay to where they are actually going to be voting is actually, it's a bit, it's not close. So, and, you need cash to access all of this place. I interacted with a lot of people on the election day, on the day of the election, and many people were like, they won't go to their voting points because, it's far away. They will need to trek. In fact, it's very, very far, and many of them were not ready to trek. I escorted one or two persons to their polling units, which is about 20 minutes from my own polling unit because, the electoral materials or the electoral officials arrived late. But, so these are factors that we also need to look at that affected the turnout. And I think it's high time we really understand that what's our definition of rigging? We had, of course, major turnouts. Youths came out en masse to vote, but not all youths voted for a particular party. We must understand that youth voted across parties. So there are youths that actually believe that Kwankwaso should be the president. There are people that believe in Bola Ahmed Tinubu. There are people that believe in Atiku Abubakar. So youth voted across party lines. Yes, we may say majority of youth came out, but then we must also remember that it is not only youth that form the voting population. Well, a lot of people would also want to argue that we can say the election was rigged because of the mood of the country. But have you been to the north? Have you been to places in South where, where certain, communities voted for a particular candidate? So, yes, the mood of the country is mixed. There are persons that are happy and there are people that are not happy, of course. So we must look at all of these things. But all in all, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's a major win for the youth. And we have been able to show that we can cause major upsets when our voices is not heard properly. So I think we need to build on this. I don't know, one of the speakers mentioned something about what next after the election, what next after now. Political participation is still low. Political participation does not start with having your PVCs alone. How many of us really participate in politics at the world level? Now, as much as we want to say that, okay, youth came out to participate, how many youth actually came out to contest this election? How many youth participated in party primaries to select who will represent them in this party primary? So these are things that we also need to look at. So that's why I mentioned something about being strategic in anticipation for the next election. yes, the Labour Party candidates, the PDP candidates have decided to go to court to challenge the court case. And I absolutely look forward to the outcome of that. But away from that, youth also need to know that we need to build on this. It's a major win for us. We can build on it. And how do we build on this? It's by going back to the world level, participate from the world level. There are people that are in the world level. It is the world level politics is actually dominated by the elderly ones. These elderly ones, we are going into another era. So we need to take over. And we can only take over from the grassroots.
Okay.
So these are things I just want us to understand.
All right, thanks for that. Let me bring in Olugbenga. Do you agree with Omotosho when he says he thinks that the election was actually fair? Do you have a different opinion, or do you agree with that? Okay, let me throw that question at, apologies. Let me throw the question at, just a second, Mubarak. Okay, Mubarak, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so do you agree with Omotosho when he says that he thinks that the election was actually free?
Yes, I think the extent to which this election wasn't fair tends to be exaggerated, particularly because when we talk about young Nigerians, we fail to understand that there is actually a divide between the North and the South primarily. And we know that this divide is cultural. We know that this divide is religious. And again, I cannot stress political organization enough, because I feel like young Nigerians from both sides of the divide didn't do enough to bridge this gap. And moving forward, this is something we need to look at. How valid are the opinions of other voters who believe they might want to vote for Kwankwaso or any other of the candidates? What are their reasons for voting for these candidates? And this requires a certain level of tolerance, which personally I think was missing from the conversation about youth participation in the electoral process. And this is why I think we must move beyond the electoral process. And I cannot stress this enough either. I think to some extent it was free and fair. To some extent there were irregularities, and these need to be addressed, and we'll see the court cases later. But overall, we cannot just assume that everyone was on the same page. And I think this assumption comes from the failures I just mentioned earlier, failures to bridge the gap between the different groups of electorates who are all entitled to their own political choices, by the way. This is still a democracy. And yes, I very much agree with Omotosho as well on that.
All right, thank you for that, Mubarak. Let me just confirm that we have Olugbenga with us.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, thank you for joining in. So just quickly, I want to ask you if you have a differing opinion to what Omotosho and Mubarak just said about the elections being fair.
We talk about fairness. I think this is one of the most interesting elections that we've had in Nigeria after a while. This is one of the most interesting because, like, the two speakers have said earlier, we witnessed Nigerians, especially the youth, participate. We saw security apparatus in place. I mean, throughout the election period, we do not have any record of security breach, which is unlike the Nigeria elections generally. We saw less of ballot snatching. We saw less of quite a number of everything was quite normal where the process is concerned. However, going by the allegations, that have trailed this election since Saturday, a lot of allegations of how INEC had been complicit and be partial, tried to favor one party over the other. I think personally, I believe that people have the right to have various opinions in an election. And the good thing is that we have a system, we are a nation, we are guided by laws and principles. And we want to see one of the things, one of the major bins of contention is the electoral law. I think talking about Section 64 that says that that talks about the EC8A, where record, of a polling unit should be recorded electronically. For some parts of the country, according to INEC, that wasn't the case. Of course, as many people also witnessed. For election being fair, I think it had to do with technical issues, according to report. And I'd like to say that for that, perhaps it's something we could have improved upon. At this point, I do not think that we should still be at this level where election is concerned. Also, considering how much the Independent National Electoral Commission tried to assure Nigerians. I remember that there were several press briefings where we saw the INEC chairman continue to reaffirm to Nigerians that the body is ready to conduct a free and fair elections that is electronically driven. But for us to get to the election day and find out that we still have this pocket of issues across different parts of the country, despite the fact that they also did a test run and had the results that they had, it certainly does mean that a lot more needs to be done especially by the Independent National Electoral Commission.
Right.
This goes to show or to tell us that we need to build stronger institutions and to ensure that these institutions do work. A lot of money was expended. Over 600 billion naira was spent in this election. And we would expect that for such humongous amount of money, that we have a smooth and hitch-free election process that is electronically driven. But what do we have? The answers are there for everyone to see.
All right, Olugbenga, let me still stay with you. Now, Omotosho mentioned earlier that beyond the electoral process, what next, especially for the youth in Nigeria? So do you think that the movement, the massive voting, the campaigning and all of that from the youth is a birth of a new Nigeria? Or do you think that after now, things will go back to mediocre, especially seeing how things turned out in this election?
This is one of the most important parts of this entire conversation because this is the part that actually holds my heart so dearly. I've spoken with quite a number of persons, especially youth, since the election, and many of them, in fact, let me share my experience. I think on the day of the election, the night, there's a friend of mine, and then we spoke. Okay, he's also, he participated to some level. And, he was vexed. He was saying he would never vote in this country again, and all of that. And I was like, Mr. Man, can you please calm down? You are a youth. You are a Nigerian youth. And as far as I know, this is the first time that we will have youth being interested in the electoral process like this. We must understand that this is a journey that we have embarked upon. I can't decide to travel to Lagos by road and then I get to Lokoja and encounter problems and decide that I will not travel to Lagos again. It shows that I did not have focus and direction. So for me, there's a lot that needs to be done. There's a lot that the system needs to, that needs to be done with the system, but we must understand that it is the youth that will be the drivers of this. So it is too early for us to say, well, by going by the result of what happened, we will not participate or we will not believe in the system. We must always remember and realize that this is our own country, and a stable democratic country is our right, and it is also to our benefit, because we are here now as youth, but the future belongs to us. Let's forget the memory verse that used by the leaders of tomorrow. We've heard that 1,000 times. But we know now that that future that we have been talking about is here. And whether we were given opportunity to take part in government or not, I think we have come of age to realize that nobody will give us this power. But nobody will just say, okay, so youths come and take over now. We have to decide. We have to play our part. We have to, in fact, I think the first thing that we need to do is to make a decision, a determinate decision that come what may, we will participate, we will play our roles in this election process until the systems become better.
All right, thank you so much for that, Olugbenga. Let me come back to you, Mubarak. Now, during the elections, of course, there were allegations and accusations that some political parties mobilized thugs and some people mobilized themselves. And even some core members were found to be complicit, and so many of his thugs were youths. Now, my question is, what does the future hold if we have so many youths seemingly so gullible?
Again, I agree that there were irregularities and a lot of youth were involved in those irregularities. But I would also attribute this again to my initial point about a lack of organization among the youth. There is practically nothing to benefit from following the large movement apart from electing the person we believe would achieve change or transform Nigeria. So a lot of young people, particularly because of the unemployment levels and the economic situation, are willing to take whatever they get at hand at the moment in order to meet immediate needs. And this is an economic problem. So I think when we talk about how many youths were involved in the irregularities of the election, we're treating the symptom of the problem and we're not really looking at the root cause, which is the economic problems associated with the country. And to change the economic problems, especially in relation with the youth, I think it requires a level of union activity, which seems to have died in Nigeria over the past few decades. And I implore young Nigerians to read about the pre-independence movement, which was led by young people like Michael Imodu, who organized the largest trade and labor union in Nigeria, and they were able to negotiate higher cost of living allowances. And after independence, they were able to transform the union into a nationalist movement, and they were able to start a whole political organization, a whole political party actually of their own. Michael Imodu and Amin Lucano, I think, are people we need to read more about to understand how young people, through industrial action, can achieve this type of change economically. Because the primary problem we have as youth is economic. It is actually not yet political. And I think we're trying to find a voice in the political settlement because we want the economic change. So we need to look at how we can organize ourselves and demand more from the system before we talk about those people who have failed to represent us as the youth, those people who have participated in election rigging and all of these things. And I think this is the first thing I would say in regards to that. The other thing is the nature of violence associated with elections. We do not actually know to what extent these people were paid off or threatened. Some people are not exactly paid. They are threatened. And if they do not do these things, because again, the state has failed to protect them and their families, they know that things could happen. Their houses could get burnt down. And this is not a Nigerian problem alone. It's all over the African continent. So we need to actually look beyond this idea that everyone participated willingly. Some people did participate under duress. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that clarification. And once again, thank you, gentlemen. Please do stay with us. It's time for us to go on a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue the conversation with our guest and also share with you reactions from social media on this very important discourse. Don't go anywhere. Well, thank you for staying with us on Fafanua Afrika. We're still talking about the impact of the youth and the role they played in the just concluded Nigeria election. And this year's election has shown so many things, one of which is that young Nigerians have made a statement that political parties can only respond by putting forward better qualified, competent and capable candidates through a transparent process of party primaries. Now, they made the decision not to take part in the regular two-horse race that we've seen over the years, filled with candidates who feel entitled to public offices and fail to inspire hope. Now, rather, they're making a good faith attempt to pit their fortunes with an alternative, with a decent shot who has a reasonable chance of being able to steer Nigeria in the right direction. Now, this election will also serve as a referendum between current political leaders and the youth, as well as a warning to those who wish to stifle the youth's aspiration and hold hostage their dreams of a free, peaceful, inclusive and democratic Nigeria. In other words, the youth are saying, we are now awake. Anyways, we still have our guests, political analyst in Abuja, Nigeria, Mubarak Aliyu. We have Isa A. Omotosho, public relations enthusiast in Lagos, Nigeria. And of course, we have Olubenga George, political analyst also from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you, gentlemen, for staying with me. All right, let's go straight to the conversation now. Omotosho, let me put you on the spotlight. Looking at all that has happened from the elections, the collision of results, there seem to be signs of compromise. I mean, yes, maybe not completely, not as exaggerated as people say, but we can't deny that there definitely seems to be some questionable processes here and there. But this time, it looks like the compromise is coming from the various arms of government. So you see, in some videos, you see it looked as if the security was compromised. And sometimes people are questioning whether or not even the judiciary is compromised. What does that say about our country?
So this is one, there's something about narrative. Even if everyone seems to say that, okay, the judiciary is compromised, the executive is compromised, the legislature is compromised, we need to look at the facts on ground. Are these things true, or are we just saying these things because some of these things do not favor us politically? So the reality is the judiciary as an arm of government does not speak to emotions, does not listen to emotions. You have to present the case before it. So we must understand that things cannot always go our way. I, as a Nigerian, I have complete faith in the judiciary. I have complete faith in the process. Let us bring it out to this to this election that just happened. I think we must understand that we all cannot have the same opinion on matters. Yes, there were glitches here and there. INEC promised to upload results on the IREV, and we didn't have that. We expected that the IREV portal will be side by side during the collation. This didn't happen. We also expected that there will be there will be lesser ballot snatching. There will not be, any form of electoral malpractice. But these things happen. But then we have to look at it. Where did these things happen? Quantify the number. Look at the number compared to where elections held peacefully. So these are things that we also need to look at. So I really do not believe this narrative of judiciary is compromised, the legislature is compromised. I think there are a lot of things we do not even see. And the reason why we don't see it is because we are not involved properly. So it's one of the reasons why I also said that youth need to go beyond just participating in elections alone. We also need to participate in governance properly. So like Mubarak mentioned, that we also need to go back to history and learn how, some of our past leaders mobilize themselves as youths to, form political party and demand for change properly. So all these narratives of this is compromise and all that, I think it's only one side of the divide, the political divide. We need to, youths need to understand that our perception of things will not be the same. We just need to be in the system, leave all these narratives, and participate properly. That's just what I feel. So I do not believe in those narratives. I do not believe in them.
All right, thank you, Omotosho, for that. Now, Mubarak, looking at our conversation so far, there seems to be, we seem to be hinting towards the fact that a lot of narratives were sold, stories were exaggerated, and, fake news was given. And of course, we know that social media these days is a tool for citizen journalism. So would you say that there was a lot of fake news? And would you say, if there was, that the social media was instrumental to that?
Yes, absolutely. I think there was a lot of fake news involved and a lot of deliberate misinformation and disinformation all over social media. And social media was directly instrumental to that. But beyond social media also, I think the level of modern technology can be associated with that, because your question reminds me actually of a video which was trending at the time of Elon Musk endorsing one of the political candidates, and everyone shared it all over Twitter and all over social media until it became known that it was a deep fake AI-made video and it actually wasn't real. So I think social media has played a big role in terms of disinformation, and this level of disinformation has been both deliberate, and that is disinformation, and non-deliberate, which is misinformation. And I think social media has also contributed in the watered down level of participation we see among youth, Nigerian youth in politics, because rather than read a long article or read a book, we would prefer reading a tweet which is only a few words, and then we make our own assumptions based on that tweet, and then we propagate this information which might be false, or half-truths which are still false. So I think there was a lot of deliberate and not so deliberate levels of fake news, and we need to be careful with that moving forward. And this can, again, only be mitigated when we have trusted youth leaders in different parts of the country who we can hold accountable for the information we're consuming and the levels of fake news that are being shared among youth circles. Because right now, youth circles exist, but they don't seem to be led by any responsible individual or group of individuals.
All right, thank you so much for that. Now let me go to Olubenga, talking about trusted youth leaders. Now, last week, I remember on the show, I was talking about bandwagon with my guests, and we saw different examples of where that's during the election now, where people came out to vote because, you know, these candidates fell under their preferred presidential candidate party. They just voted them in without even knowing their names. So, I mean, what does this say about the Constitution? We know that the youths are clamoring for change at this point, but don't you think they took it a tad bit too high by voting in people who they didn't even know? I mean, there was a case of a person who they voted in without even knowing his name, and eventually they were asking, who is he? You know, you see people having high numbers because they fell under a particular party. What do you say about that?
Honestly, Blessing, I think this is the most interesting part of this conversation for me, because I saw it firsthand, and I have actually been loud on this since the elections were completed. There was a particular candidate I know that participated, went around since last year, campaigned and did all of that, but didn't belong to a particular party. Let's also not forget that a lot of people saw the youth movement. I mean, you spoke about the bandwagon effect, and this is something we really need to be wary of as we move on in our democratic development, because I noticed that despite the fact that some of these candidates or these particular candidates went all out, spoke to people, went to organizations, on the actual day of the election, people just, you know, gave their thumb from top to bottom. You get what I mean? It is very dangerous for our development. I said it, but I do not know what to expect really in the coming administration, especially in the National Assembly, because a lot of people got this sympathy vote, and these are bandwagon effect votes. We should be intentional about choosing our leaders. We should know who they are. We should ask questions. They must have come to us. We must have tested them over time. We must have known that this is the ideal leader that we want. They must have come up with their promises, with their campaign promises, with their manifestos. And we must have studied them intently and know which one we want to go for. I think it is very dangerous for us, really, to just decide to just give our thumbs, give our votes to people we do not know. And
right.
That was very, very common in this election. So you talk about youth leadership. I think the political parties need to be intentional. The Constitution, like you said, also, I do not know if it can be taught per se, but I think the Electoral Act spoke about quite the attitude of the candidate in the election. So I think it should become a norm, right, that candidates have several platforms to be able to showcase themselves. There were quite a lot, this time, like never before that I have witnessed, since I've been seeing elections in this country, where you have candidates go to different platforms to speak to people and tell the people what exactly they want to do.
All right. Apologies because of our time. I've loved to continue that conversation, but I'm sorry about that. We would need to go to check out the tweets now. But let me just take this opportunity to thank you all, our guests, political analyst in Abuja, Nigeria, Mubarak Aliyu. Thank you for joining me. Issa A. Omotosho, a public relations enthusiast, Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you for being on the show. And of course, Olubenga George, political analyst, also from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the show with me today.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.